I'm all nervous. Shelley, are you nervous?
Woo! Got butterflies ready to go.
Rob, nobody believes for a minute that you're nervous.
No, and you have to answer all the trivia questions, Rob, because you're the industry historian. So you better
I'm
know
not.
the answers.
Hold on. A, I'm not the industry historian. B, I am pretty good at trivia. We used to play Trivial Pursuits. I held my own.
Yeah, my
Nope.
husband, I would partner with my husband because he would always have the right answer. So you are my partner on this. Counting
Yeah,
on you.
nobody seems to play that anymore.
I was
No.
terrible at it. Trivia Pursuit, I was terrible.
Yeah.
Unless it was like culture thing, like movie related, or they came up with those
It's only one of those wedges, right?
yeah, I could do one, but I couldn't do all. Was it six?
Yeah.
I think there's six. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah. All right. Speaking of trivia, are we ready? I have some fun ones today.
Okay.
Oh, we got everybody in. All right. So Rob actually sent this one to me. So Rob, you can't answer.
Oh, crap. Now I'm on the hook.
But we'll see. We'll see. I am positive there are folks in the chat that know this. For those of you that don't know, I just found out what Wordle is probably about the last, I don't know, maybe 6 months. Apparently I've been living under a rock. But somebody told me about Wordle, and I want to know what do you guys think the first ever Wordle was?
Word.
Wordle, like the word that was
What's the winning word?
used as the first Wordle.
Quick.
Did I say it right? Score. Cigar. Ocean. Oh,
Ocean's a good starter word.
yeah.
Oh, cigar. We got 2 cigars.
Yeah, 2 cigars.
Wishful thinking on a Friday.
Nancy, I said the exact same thing.
There's
You
another
gotta
cigar.
Google it. Apparently it's a game. I just found out about it in the last 6 months or so. Look at all these suggestions. These are all great. Yeah, we have 3 people now with cigar. Actually, oh, Amy's given her starter word. Everybody her starter word. I love it. All right, so the answer actually is cigar. So we had 3 people that got it right. Steve Turner, you always get our trivia questions right. Like I'm super impressed. All right, so next one, because we're in the whole credit world right now. I have some fun credit trivia for us too.
Who would have ever thought that that even existed?
Fun credit trivia, to be exact.
Right.
I'm excited about it, but I'm an Uber nerd. So, all right, of the 3 credit bureaus, which one was established first?
I don't know the answer to that. Let me think.
Oh, we got lots of TransUnions.
Yeah, TU would have been my guess.
Well, TransUnion has kind of a classic name.
It does. Are you going for TransUnion too?
And
Sure.
it was called something before TransUnion, wasn't it?
Andrew actually got it right. Retail Credit Company, which was Equifax.
Really?
Yeah. It was established in 1899. Which one sells the most trigger leads, Greg?
Jim Leaf, you can't answer that. You work at Equifax. That's not fair.
Yeah, that's a good trivia question there.
Okay, so the founder of Equifax, what did he do prior to starting the company? Prior to founding Equifax, what did he do? What do you guys
What was
think?
the name of the company what was the original name?
Retail Credit Company. Or Retail Credit Company.
Somebody said snake oil. That's funny.
Snake oil.
Well, it's Atlanta, so maybe he worked at Coca-Cola.
Greg.
Yeah.
Greg's on trigger lead mode right now. Montgomery Ward, Pony Express. A farmer? Okay. Coal miner?
Could be Montgomery Ward.
All right. He was actually a grocery store owner that ended up knowing, taking the list of customers that paid him on time all the time, and then sold that list to other businesses in town.
So triggers were there from the beginning, people. That's what Melissa just said.
Yep. Yep. All right. Hopefully everybody learned something new and had a little bit of fun while we did it. All right. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and kick things off. I don't have an endless supply of trivia questions on credit. Hey, if we have not met before, my name is Melissa Langdale, and I'm the president and COO of the Mortgage Collaborative. And as always, joined by Rob Chrisman, the kind of industry icon, and Shelley claimed
Don't
industry
repeat it. He got mad at me. Don't repeat it.
And our very special guest this week, Shelley Leonard, who is the president of Xactus. Thank you so much for joining us, Shelley.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm super excited about our conversation. We have lots of good things queued up for everybody. But before we kick off, you want to tell everybody a little bit about Xactus?
Sure. So hopefully by now everyone has heard of Xactus, and it is pronounced like Xactus with a Z. So think about cactus with a Z, Xactus. We hear a lot of Xactus, and for those of us here, we reinforce Xactus a lot. So we'll know you're in the know if you know how to say it. Xactus was actually a rebrand of some companies that we acquired and brought together over about a 3 to 5 year period. We rebranded the company in March of 2022 as Xactus, but you would know the names of the legacy companies that we acquired, whether it was CIS or Avantis, Credit Plus, Universal Credit, to name a few. We brought those companies together again to create scale and to build a company that could innovate in the credit space. So that really was the primary goal. Was from our founder, Perry Steiner, who was looking at the industry and saying, gosh, and actually, I think Rob just said this, not a lot exciting happens in credit. No one's really leveraging technology. They're not really doing anything innovative. For an entrepreneur, that spells opportunity, right? So that was the opportunity that Perry saw, and we started acquiring companies and building up industry-leading companies to form Xactus, and now we've integrated into one company and are executing on that strategy to innovate in the verification space. So we are broader than just a credit company. We actually have end-to-end verifications across the whole life cycle, from before an application is taken all the way through after a loan is closed, including QA and QC, for example. We again do sell credit, which is what we're going to talk about a lot today, but we do have a full suite of products across that verification space.
Okay, you said one of my most favorite words, which is innovation. And I know you and I both share a love of technology, for everything from creating operational efficiencies to kind of helping to lower the cost of origination for the industry. As you think about all that you see out there, all that's being offered today, what are you most excited about that you can share?
That's a great question. I think that, again, in a space that hasn't had a lot of innovation, there's a lot to get excited about, first and foremost. I joke around that the last time that innovation was done in the credit space was when they went from paper to computers. But it's kind of the truth. From my perspective, again, what we're focused on is really how do we start to create some differentiation in the verification space where it's largely been a commodity market, right? And so how can you leverage technology to deliver data into at the right point within the origination process? That's really our goal. And part of getting there was, one of the legacy companies had a platform. It's now known in the industry as Xactus 360. We are almost complete with upgrading all of our clients onto Xactus 360. That's going to enable us to really accelerate the innovation in the verification space, responding to market needs of our clients, but also leveraging evolving technology, because that evolving word, it probably doesn't even accurately depict what's happening. Technology is moving so fast. And I would say mortgage industry as a whole, no one would be surprised to say we're not on the leading edge or the bleeding edge of technology. We may watch things evolve and then adopt as technologies get more mature. But we're really looking at automation dynamic workflow. And all of this is enabled through technologies that we can deploy within Xactus 360, and then through the integration into the broader ecosystem within originations, and also servicing. I'm really excited about AI, and I know that sounds cliche because everyone's talking about AI, but you know, I'm using it in all kinds of different ways. But one of the things that I heard actually a futurist say at an Experian conference that I attended, he was trying to explain that we're thinking about AI wrong. And it really resonated with me and really got me even more excited about it, because he said, think about this. When you talk about your refrigerator, you don't say, this is my refrigerator powered by electricity, right? It's just assumed it runs on electricity. All of our technology should run on AI. That's the way to think about it, right? And so we've been thinking about AI on the fringe, I would think about it, right? So Copilot, powered by AI, you know, these are things where they're trying to insert AI into your normal work routine. But really, you need to think about, how do you rethink the technology to where AI is embedded and an inherent part of the technology. And that's when I think all the exciting things will come, as to how can we make the human part of getting a mortgage and keep it human, right? Instead of the humans focusing on some of the repetitive or mundane task, or, you know, you hear people talk about the mortgage origination process being like getting a root canal. It's not because the people that they're interacting with are dentists. It's because there's just so many steps, and it is a lot of gathering data and information, sometimes repetitively, and sending it to multiple places and interacting with 4, 5, 6 different portals to get through the mortgage process. This is where, again, I think we can leverage technology to focus on that user, that end consumer experience that has me the most excited.
You and I could nerd out on this all day long, because I talk about this so much. We've built so many technology platforms today that facilitate the paper process that we used to have. Right. And I think this is just a pivotal moment for our industry to look and say, what is really possible, and how do we rethink what we do to make things easier, make our consumer experience easier, help our teams to be able to stay at their highest and best use, and not be in this whole stare and compare part of the process that we've had forever.
Right. And I'm not worried about, you know, the question that always gets asked is, well, is everyone who works in mortgage going to lose their jobs? No, absolutely not. You guys are full of experience and have compassion and want to help consumers get into homes. That's what we do. We have to remember the reason for what we do. And we need to leverage that technology to allow us to spend the majority of our time on that, educating consumers, helping them understand how they can manage their finances so that they can afford to get in a home, when's the right time for them to purchase a home, and then helping them through that process to relieve their stress. It's a stressful time, right? And so if we're always also having to do all these tasks and manage all those portals, it's stressful for us too. And so if we can alleviate some of that, make it easier, I think it's just going to make it a much better process. And I think it ultimately will open up that process to many more Americans to actually be able to be a homeowner.
Right. I totally agree with you. But I do want to switch our conversation a little bit to some of the harder things that we've heard about credit over the last, gosh, not quite a year, but, you know, especially with CFPB coming out with, you know, their memo on junk fees and credit reports being, you know, the rising cost of credit reports being a part of that conversation. Can you help us to clear the air? Like, what is really driving up the cost of credit reports right now?
Sure. So, you know, unfortunately, it's been a couple of really hard years from a credit report cost standpoint. And the first thing I'm going to say is the cost of a credit report is definitely not a junk fee. You're getting value, right? To me, a junk fee is you're charging for something that has no value.
Know about which
Right. It's not a nuisance fee, right? It really is the lenders are getting something of value. The GSEs are getting something of value. The investors ultimately get something of value when that credit is used to evaluate, you know, the ability for that borrower to repay and their credit worthiness to warrant extending a loan, right? Which is them loaning out their money with the anticipation of getting repaid. There have been really obviously large price increases way above the norm. The credit industry typically went through an annual price increase, but it was, more aligned to, cost of living increase or something like that. It was small in nature. It was obviously not a great time. I think that has a lot to do with some of the angst around it. Obviously, our industry was it was really struggling the last 2 years. There are a lot of lenders that, were having to let people go, were having to make really hard decisions in order to stay in business. They were having to fight really hard for every new loan. There's a lot of companies losing money. And so it was a hard time in our industry to also layer this on top of, which just exacerbated the problem. Ultimately, again, someone like a Xactus and the others in our space, we are resellers of data for the most part. We do have some of our own products like Flood, for example. But within credit, everyone buys credit from the 3 major credit bureaus, and the credit bureaus obviously have cost associated with acquiring that data, aggregating that data, making sure that data is as accurate as possible. They have technology costs. Everyone's, having to go to the cloud and make sure they've got all their data security. That's expensive, right? So we're not, again, immune from inflationary cost and increasing technology costs either in the credit space. So you got to take some of that into account. But there are multiple parts that flow through that supply chain that ultimately add up to the overall cost of credit. And, it really is, an increased cost from suppliers that ultimately result in an increased cost to buyers. I think that the goal really was for people to understand and for those suppliers to extract the value that lenders and investors were receiving from the credit data and the scores based on what they were being used for in the origination process. So, they had been, kind of at the same price point for many, 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 many years. But that data was very much relied on in the origination space. And so, I think that's a little bit of kind of how we got here. And now the question is, what do we do about it? I don't necessarily think that it's a problem we can't solve together as an industry. I don't necessarily think it's something that we need the CFPB to come in and regulate. I think it's something that goes back to where we started the conversation, honestly, about technology, which is, when something is not priced to value, sometimes that product, whatever it is, may get abused, and you may use more of it than maybe you need to use. And so now what's happening in the industry is we're all getting very, very efficient about when we pull credit, why we're pulling credit, who are we pulling credit on, how many bureaus are we pulling? Are we pulling 1, 2, or 3? At what point in the process is the right time to pull credit? And so it's driving a lot of really great conversations. Credit costs, sometimes get passed on to the borrower as a part of their closing costs. But it really never was anything anybody really focused on. And now that it is a big P&L item for all these lenders, it is causing everyone to focus on it, which is a bad way to get there, but a good outcome because it's driving conversations around how do we reduce waste? How do we drive more efficiencies in our process? How do we put more controls in place to make sure we're only getting the data we need at the time we need the data? How do we manage our credit and other verification costs? Because it's not just credit, it kind of applies to all verification products. But how do we make sure that we're ordering them in a controlled fashion and leveraging technology to drive when it's the right time to get that data, to evaluate the data and make sure you're only getting the data that you need to make the decision warranted for that specific consumer, that specific investor. So it's causing us to get a little more granular in our process instead of being very, very kind of least common denominator. Everybody just do it this way because this is the way everybody does it. And it's less complicated that way, but it's more expensive. So now that we have the technology where we can do that dynamic workflow based on different variables, I do think it's allowing us to drive some efficiencies, working in conjunction with our lender partners.
Shelley, do you ever hear about lenders charging up front for credit?
Yes, actually, we have a couple lender customers today that do that. We're actually in the process, and I actually was able to see a demo of it today, of developing a product that would facilitate that process from the loan officer to the consumer to enable them to have a very secure way to make that payment. If they wanted the consumer to have a little skin in the game up front, pay for that credit report up front, versus the lender carrying that cost. So we definitely are seeing that. And again, it's one of those things where people are either all for it or totally against it. We're not seeing a big, kind of agreement on which way is the right way. And so from our perspective, we're going to make it available both ways, so that it's lender choice and it may even be loan officer choice, so that they can decide what's a right fit for them, for their customer base, for their objectives.
Thank you.
All right, we had a few comments in the chat around trigger leads. So I'll at least address, I know there's a couple of things that lenders are doing to try to, at least, protect their pipeline, protect their customers. What are some of the things that you're seeing that are really helpful right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So, clearly trigger leads is something that is a pain point for our industry. People pay a lot for these leads, and or they have a portfolio of their own customers that it's very important for them to retain, and no one wants to start a process where those customers can easily be swiped out of your pipeline, right? So the bureaus actually, I think heard that pain point, and reacted. And so at the beginning of this year, they all three of the credit bureaus introduced a new product that is a pre-approval product. So again, it's the same soft pull that you would use in a pre-qual, if you think about it that way. But a pre-qual was always intended for marketing purposes. So think about sending out marketing campaigns, things of that nature, that you were going to do to grow a pipeline, but never was that credit pull intended to be used for underwriting. With the pre-approval product, it is again a soft pull. So there's not an inquiry that gets written to the credit report, which is what causes the triggers. But you can use that because of the permissible purpose of that credit pull. You can use it through the underwriting process. Now, there is a requirement before you ever complete the underwriting process. You do have to post the hard pull. You do have to pull a tri-merge credit report in order to get that hard pull posted, so that, again, we're following all of the requirements of the bureaus, the FCRA, the GSEs. But that time that you can protect your pipeline from the time you pulled that soft pull and went through some of the underwriting process is giving you some ample time, if you will, to get that customer down the path with you, before they might potentially get hundreds of calls. I think that was the other interesting thing about triggers is, when we talk to lenders, it was as much about how it impacted their pipeline risk as how their consumers just hated it. That customer experience was so terrible, and lenders were getting blamed for, are you selling my data? Because as soon as I talked to you, I got 80 phone calls, and that was not an exaggeration. Sometimes it was 200 phone calls to my cell phone, and consumers were mad about it. So it is also helping us, in the industry, create a better consumer experience by them not experiencing that extreme amount of selling that comes from people that have bought those trigger leads. So we are definitely seeing a lot of adoption of that pre-approval product in the industry, and using that to protect their pipeline and drive a better customer experience.
Alan, thank you in the chat. He's saying that others are talking about trigger law passing, being effective June of 2025. There's actually a couple of trigger lead laws that are in the works right now. And I do know of one of them that is getting a ton of support. So I agree with you. I think there is going to be some, not relief, but maybe relief. There's going to be some guardrails in place around it that should help consumers. We do have a question from Jerry. What's the cost of a pre-approval report? How does that vary from like the hard pull?
It's the same.
Okay.
So again, because it can be used for underwriting purposes, it has all of the same components that a hard pull does. So it has the full credit file, trended data, your score. So it is all the same components that would drive the cost of a hard pull. So that pre-approval product is at the same price point as a hard pull. So again, that means you got to think about your workflow. And you got to think about when do you want to use it, because ultimately you'll have to pull a soft and a hard. But you know, we are seeing again some customers that are leveraging pre-approval. Again, maybe it's in all of their channels, maybe it's just in some of their channels. It kind of depends on their ratios of fallout, and really consumer behavior. And how early they pull credit in the process. That's another key indicator here, is where is that first point you're pulling that credit, and how confident are you that that borrower is going to proceed. So, you know, we have seen some lenders start to achieve some savings by reducing fallout, because maybe they were doing that pre-qual with trended data with a score, which again was costly, and they were seeing a lot of fallout and then having to pull the hard pull. So we are seeing again some reduction of waste by leveraging pre-approval, you know, with savings in the 10 to 15% range, even though they are pulling multiple credit reports, because their pull-through rates going up by not having triggers impact their pipeline.
The other thing I know a lot of our lenders are talking about is the transition from tri-merge to bi-merge, and it's optional right now, but you know, eventually this will be something that comes to full fruition for everybody. So as you're talking with lenders about that transition, often, you know,